I remember at some point hearing a sermon from Sinclair Ferguson, who is a pastor and teacher that I greatly admire, and whose work and thought on all manner of aspects of the church I've certainly valued. And Ferguson said that at some point early in his ministry, then a publishing house approached him about writing a book on prayer, a manual, if you will, a how-to book. I think it was, would you write a book on the Lord's Prayer or something to that effect? And Dr. Ferguson's response was, I'm far too young, he said. I'm far too immature, not experienced enough, not seasoned enough in my life as a leader or as a Christian to write a book on how to pray. And so he said to them, why don't you go to so-and-so, another member of our denomination or whatever, another member of the Church of Scotland that he was a part of, and ask them for a book on this. And lo and behold, he found out that they had approached that guy first, and that person had also said, I'm far too unprepared. I'm far too inexperienced in my own prayer life to write a book on prayer. And so I, in light of that, and in light of the fact that here I am, compared certainly to Sinclair Ferguson, far less experienced and far younger than a pastor of that experience and seasoned nature, and someone whose wisdom and maturity is so admirable, and he's turned away opportunities to write books on prayer. How is it that I could write a book on prayer? And what I like to hope is that it's two things. And the first is this, that I didn't so much set out to write a book on how to pray, because I just like Dr. Ferguson and just like so many others, I don't feel qualified as someone who struggles with my own prayer life on writing about how to pray. There are very good books that have been written on that too. And I would gladly, when somebody says, can you help me learn how to pray, I'll put one of these books in their hand. But not so much how to pray, but what to pray. My goal for all the saints was to provide a content guide, not a how-to manual. I wanted to say, look, if you already pray, if you're committed to prayer, then let me give you some topics to pray for. Let me suggest some ways that you can be praying for your church, for your local congregation, for churches around you, for your denomination, and so forth. So, first of all, I like to hope that my book doesn't come across as, well, I've figured out how to pray, because certainly I haven't. But more that as somebody who has been in ministry in the church now for a number of years, not so very many, but nevertheless, I've learned a little bit of something on what to pray for the local church. The other thing is this. Of course, you've probably heard the expression, if it's worth doing, then it's worth doing well. And somebody, early on in my ministry, somebody pointed out to me that when it comes to ministry in the church, that if it's worth doing poorly. If we can't do it well, then at least we should, if it's worth doing, we should still do it poorly, as well as we can do it, which may be, in fact, quite poor. And as I mentioned before, when I looked around and found almost nothing written on how to pray for the church, that is to say, what specific things we might be praying for about the local church, then my thought was, well, as meager as my efforts might be, it still will be better than nothing. Something on praying for the church is better than no works on praying for the church. And so when Sinclair Ferguson finally does write his book on prayer, maybe he will write a book on how to pray for the church, or how we might include God's kingdom and his church in our regular times of prayer and devotions. When he writes that book, or when somebody else writes that book, then I will gladly hand over to them whatever leadership I may have assumed in that area of ministry. I don't have any wish to hold myself up as the final standard, rather simply to say, lacking anything else, then I will step up into this role. So that's been my objective with For All the Saints, is just simply to say, I'm setting out to teach you what to pray in the absence of anything much better or more substantial than my humble work.